Hey there, hunters. Okay, one last Remnant 2 video since I kind of got bored and I kind of want to clear up some air and talk about a couple other things. So I've mentioned before that I haven't updated my, dot builds or my starfield builds yet because I've been waiting for some patches, which I do expect to hit in December. Hopefully we get a big Christmas update. But Thanksgiving and the holidays kind of slow things down, and also I'm not expecting anything to come relatively soon. But I do want to talk about all the things I'm looking forward to seeing changed kind of before I start to make new builds. And this is also going to be kind of like a wish list of what I want for like our Christmas update. I'm not really in a rush to play different things since we can only have 10 loadout slots and they're kind of full already, and that would be actually a great one to add. First, could we get 20 loadout slots and the ability to name them? But anyway, other than that, here's what's on the radar for the future and kind of what the builds I want to play and the fixes that need to happen for me to play them. So to start off, of course, dot builds. We all know that the dot duration is a huge DPS loss right now since the DLC launched, and the devs have already said it, they already said they're working on it, it's gonna happen. But it kinda killed both my dot spam build and my starfuel build for differing reasons. So the first reason is Affliction trait and the Timekeeper's Jewel. And if you're not familiar, I know I've talked about this before, but we'll go over it again. What it's doing is that it's adding duration, which is only literally adding duration as written. So you do the same amount of damage over a longer period of time, which isn't helping. This was changed from how it functions pre-DLC, where the Timekeeper's Jewel added double dot duration, which increased the total dot damage, so you do the same DPS just over a longer period of time. And this is probably what we're going to get when they actually fix the dot duration stuff, but we'll see. But because of this, we really can't play dot ritualist builds as they cannot remove their affliction trait and thus have half the DPS as other dot builds. Also, with the changes to Energized Net Coil, it no longer becomes a valid option for dot builds for the time being. Maybe when the duration changes, which will give us increased total damage, which should increase our Net Coil's proc damage, it'll make it more favorable, but right now with the 5-second internal cooldown on one dot, but we're gonna have to see what happens with the changes and if Net Coil becomes better than running like Sinister Totem. Now, along the same lines as dots, my Starfield build is actually significantly better now because of the problems with dot duration, but on the inverse side. The Fanatic Ring, which reduces dot duration, has the same but inverse problem as Affliction and Timekeepers. Because we do the same damage but over 1/3 the duration, we're effectively tripling our dot DPS, but for the few ticks that they're active. But if you can, constantly apply the dot, this is a huge damage boost for dot spam builds, which include Starfuel. And because the dot ticks are so much higher, they provide significantly more mod power than they should, and can fuel the build on the fire dots alone from Starshot, and then maybe if you need to, the Sparkfire shotgun. But the problem is I don't want to make builds and do showcases of them when I know they're going to get fixed, and when they change the dot duration, I don't know if the mod generation will be able to sustain it, or if I'm going to have to change to run some different mods or build up mods longer, stuff like that, so we're going to have to see. So while the build is probably going to be in the best state that it'll ever be in, I again don't want to make videos going over the new changes because I'm unsure of what's going to change in the next patch, and then it'll just probably become obsolete. So the dot changes are holding me back from playing a lot of mod and obviously dot builds, and I really want to get into those, but again, just gotta wait. I had also recently found out that the Challenger archetype, which I was previously using for this, is no longer working for explosive and summoning mods, and anything that appears to have an individual entity or a child property doesn't consider the player's range and no longer provides the damage bonus, from Challenger. Also, Challenger seems to have some weird snapshotting issues from when you actually equip it and what's targeted. It's just a hot mess right now. It's a big shame because I could swear this worked properly before the DLC, but I guess now it's not. So Challenger is going to have to go, and then when the dot changes come in, Ritualist will most likely come and take its place. So I mean, again, everything as far as dots and mod swappers and Starfield is all kind of up in the air right now. The other weird thing about dot builds is overload. I don't know how overload works when multiple stacks apply. As it is right now, overload does not really suffer from the dot duration changes because of the wording of the dot. So unlike other dots that do X damage over X time, overload does a fixed damage every X seconds, so longer durations just increase the amount of overload pops you can get. That being said, multiple stacks of overload don't seem to do anything consistent, or I don't know, it's just, maybe it's Red Ring of Death stacks don't do anything, I'm not sure, but I can't get overloads to be consistent at all, and I'm not sure why. Sometimes they do like multiple little shock ticks in between the actual pops, sometimes they do bigger pops and then weaker pops, and I don't know why. Sometimes with Red Ring of Death, you could put on 2 stacks and then they don't do anything. So I don't know what's going on with overloads, and I want to play an overload build, but I don't know if any of the dot changes are going to affect overload, and the consistency is just messing me up. So that's going to actually tie me into this next topic. So the Shocker melee mutator is really sick now, especially when you pair it with Spectral Blade. It's just a lot of fun, and I want to do like an overload melee build with either Spectral Blade or the Scythe, maybe something else. But because of the overload procs are hugely inconsistent, I can't seem to figure out how to scale the damage of this properly because they're just all over the place. And because I don't know what's going on with the dots when the inevitable dot changes get put in, I don't know if overload's going to want longer durations, shorter durations, do I just want to scale damage, I don't know. So I'm not sure with this build, it's just kind of on the back burner for now just because of overload and dot stuff, but a little different reasoning. But another reason for that is because the Boar mod, which I'm still wishing to get fixed, is highly bugged for melee weapons in general, granting melee's the ability to hit twice, both on the boar and the target itself, which obviously just lets boar deal double damage for melee hits, and of course double hits to proc, Shocker even faster. And of course there are bigger problems with that and Atom Splitter that just, splits into like 17 hits. But even for Spectral Blade, not only does it obscure the damage it can do, but it increases the procs of Shocker, so I'm gonna have to see if this build is even halfway viable after the changes that should come. And I actually don't expect boar to get fixed for a while, to be honest. It's not that big of a deal. Yes, it's bugged with melee and like the Twisted Arbalist, but I mean, that's about it. Just don't use it. But I also, again, I don't want to rely on it because it's going to be fixed eventually. So, I mean, again, I just don't want to make the build because all this stuff's kind of up in the air. And then we got Anguish, which we all know does no damage right now, but because it's a bug that's making it scale to a +10 as a normal weapon, it's not treated as a boss weapon. So right now at +10, its scaling is only 2 times its base damage, not 3 times like a +10 boss weapon should. It's effectively, a +10 normal weapon that would normally go to +20. So effectively, we should be getting 50% more damage when that gets patched in, which would make it significantly better and would probably warrant using on some builds. This would include the mod and its damage as well. So there's a lot to look into there. As a preliminary test, you can also just try to make builds with it and test the DPS of Anguish and then just crank it up by 50% and get an estimate on how much it's going to do when it's fixed. And I went and done this, and I think it's actually much more approachable with 50% more damage. I'll probably begin by swapping the Magnum out of my Shotgun Swapper builds for Anguish, because then I can actually scale spread reductions for both my weapons, and the extra ammo on Anguish will let me regen faster than the Magnum with Provisioner's Ring. And I think this will be a solid swap for damage. So I'm excited to give that a try. Also, the mod for Anguish, which I can get to about 2k DPS right now on its own, which is kind of bad for sure, but considering that it's going to get 50% stronger, we should be able to get near about 3k DPS, which is much more respectable for a dot build. So I'm actually looking forward to building around Anguish once that gets its 50% damage bonus, and I'm sure it's actually going to be a pretty good weapon compared to even Corrupted Meridian and Sawed Off Shotgun, so hopefully before Christmas update. Now moving on, this isn't actually a bug, but it's still one of those things that's like on the Christmas update list that I would love to see. I want to see summons improved, because my god, summons deal no damage and they are so slow. Now, one of the issues I have with summons is that they often actually just don't even inherit bonuses from items equipped by players unless it specifically affects summons or it's just like, all damage, which makes sense, of course, but it kind of sucks because like if you're going to go and scale like global crit chance and try and get crit for your minions and things, kind of like Burden of the Gambler or Atonement Fold, summons don't inherit that because it's not skill crit, it's just your crit. So things like that, like crit, procs, stuff like that can't really trigger from summons. So all they really have to scale is like flat damage and anything that specifically says skills or summons, which wouldn't be so bad if their base damage wasn't so low, because we do actually have a lot of like, now flat added skill damage things, but you can put all the skill damage stuff on you want, you're not going to get much out of it. Because even on Apocalypse here, with full skill damage trinkets and sets and everything all prepped and go, I can barely get the Handler's Dog to do 200 damage per second, and that's with skills and relic buffs for the dog active. Whereas I could also just take any gun and shoot for almost 10 times that DPS with some moderate gear. And because a lot of the times when you're scaling like summons and skills and things, you're also dealing no damage to your guns anyway. So you're kind of like on a lose-lose there. And then in the dog's case, it's just kind of a shame that it can't take advantage of its own bleed and use something, like Whetstone for it. So what I actually want to see for summons is just increased baseline damage for summons, because the turrets are terrible, the summoner's summons are terrible, and the dog's terrible. Or if they just inherited the stats of the player, that'd be cool too. Like if you had fire rate and it increases their attack speed, or if you had like melee attack speed and increases, dog and reaver, attack speed, that'd be cool too. Stuff like that. But also, pets don't draw aggro on bosses at all. Even the defensive dog with guard, a howl active, nor the reaver minion for summons. So there's not even any pressure that they alleviate either. Though of course they do draw plenty of aggro, against like trash and ads, which is not insubstantial. They're just not very helpful on bosses at all. Plus they still die kind of a lot. Anyway, all I'm getting at here is that there's no way to make summons deal like a reasonable amount of damage without some serious buffs. And that's why I haven't played Summoner or Handler or Turret with Engineers. They're just not worth it. I mean, kudos for you if you like it, but statistically, they're just not up to snuff on Apocalypse. So again, kind of like, my wish list to Santa, this is one of the things I would love to see changed. So hopefully during some of the changes, Summoner can get some extra love because I really do enjoy minion playstyles, and they were awesome in Remnant 1, but they're kind of fumbling here in Remnant 2. Anyway, that's kind of what I'm waiting to get changed and fixed before I dive into new builds. I do think there's going to be another patch sometime early in December, which of course I'll come back to and do updates for. But for now, I'm kind of on maintenance mode, as most everything I want to mess with is just not working properly in some way. But stay tuned for updates, patch coverage, hopefully new toys to play with, and perhaps even modding news. I don't really know what the point of this video was. I just wanted to talk about all the stuff that I want to talk about, but I can't really do yet because, I don't know, I have like some, I don't know if I would call it integrity or just like, I don't want to have to do a video twice if they change it in 2 weeks. So yeah, I have a lot of builds I want to make. I just kind of waiting on those. But yeah, that's going to be all for me. Thank you all for watching.